Hello, welcome to a very special episode of D54. I'm Amit and I'm joined by Bibin. Welcome, mate.
I,
Bibin's a fan of our show and he really enjoyed the movie Malaikottai Vaaliban, and so did I. And I'm really glad to see that while this movie seems to have mixed reviews, there's a lot of people that really liked it, including the two of us. But what I really appreciated about Bibin was he emailed me and he told me that he has a unique perspective about this movie. And then we talked the other day, and yeah, his perspective on this movie is just so fantastic, guys, that it would be almost a crime for me to just rehash it and tell you guys. So the best way for you guys to sort of get Bibin's point of view and sort of his sort of thinking behind this movie. And I really do think if you see this movie like Bibin sort of has, and we sort of appreciate it in that way, I think you guys are going to get a lot more out of it because it's not a straightforward movie. And there are things in this movie which I think if you watch it with a certain perspective, you start to appreciate it a bit more. And it's stuff that I didn't even pick up immediately, but Bibin's watched it twice now. Is that correct?
yeah, true.
Yeah, twice. So he's got a broader perspective. But yeah, man, just I'll let you talk about sort of what you thought about this movie and I guess the psychology behind it and also how it impacted you because I remember you talking about it, how it was really like an emotional journey to sort of really took you to, which was amazing. I found.
Yeah. Sure. So the first time me watching the film, in my mind, I had so much things, like I was expecting something big because something in a big budget is like showing up. And of course, Mohanlal is there and LJP, one of my favorite directors, is joining hands. And like, the expectations were all like, something like pan-Indian, like kind of commercial. I didn't thought it would be a regular commercial film, but then I thought it will have a little more of its commercial aspects to it. But while I was watching the film, I was, to be fair, not happy with the first watch, and I was like, "Oh, why is this not going to the next shot, or why is this taking so long to establish like a very like a small thing?" And then I was like, there was this constant conversation within me that, oh man, why is this dragging so much? Just go to the next shot, or just go to the next scene, for that sake. And then by the end of the film, the last 30 minutes was the part where I was really gripped into in the entire film. And I just felt like for that last 30 minutes, they dragged the film so much. And, right after the film, I just called my cousin and I was like, man, I just felt like Lijo is taking granted. Lijo is taking us for granted just because we like his films. He thinks he can do anything. And then, and he just thinks that we'll accept it. And I was really feeling bad, and I was like, okay, that last 30 minutes was good, but then for that it took so long. And then I went to work the very next day, and I was just simply thinking of the film, and it's slightly started like, I started off thinking on what perspective the film was made, because I work with students with autism and learning disability. So I've seen how students open a book, how they read read a story, or how they look into that and things like that. So I've seen one of my students opening a book, looking into just one picture for a very long time. And the student is obviously nearly 20 years old, but then because he has is in the autism spectrum, he is like so I was thinking, when I was a kid, I used to do the same. Like when I was maybe in my when I was 5 years old or 6 years old, I used to just open a book, stare at the pictures, take the time to process. And then I started seeing that instead of watching this as a continuous film, I think it should be seen as an anthology of like comic stories that ends in a very high note, where each part of the film is based on how a person would perceive it during a particular age of time. Like, for example, the first part of the film, or where the entry of Mohanlal happens, I think that part is how a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old would imagine if a story is told to them. Like, for example, the very first frame where there is like, so it's taking so long for the donkey to run around, and then the bullock carts are coming from a very long place. This is how a grandmother would explain the story to a young kid. And then And a 6-year-old or 7-year-old will take its time to process, and the way a 6 or 7-year-old would imagine that, that story that's been told to him is something that what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then if we think about it, the intro is very simple, even though it was hyped about like so much,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's what the production team did.
Yeah.
So uh, and so it came slow, and it was on in the perspective of how the child would imagine that one, like where a huge mountain like wrestler is coming,
Mm-hmm.
and then Malaikottai Vaaliban is not even getting up from his sitting position,
Yeah.
just meditating, just taking his shawl and just wrapping it around him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then doing his flip thing. And that's a very simple concept in terms of concept as well. If you think about it, Malaikottai Vaaliban, a very strong wrestler, is defeating a random wrestler in a village who is also strong and who's with so much pride,
Yeah.
and just Malaikottai Vaaliban is simply coming and just beating him up. So that's
Yeah.
a very simple plot that we would tell to a 5 or 6 year old,
Yeah.
and then and it's made in a way that how that 5 or 6 year old would imagine that story.
Correct. Yeah. And
Yeah.
just to like even before that, because I remember you sharing me with the comic book
Yes.
series,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
prelude. So you're talking about 5 or 6 year olds. Like if you guys,
yeah. Mm.
I'm going to put screenshots of the comic
Oh
up
yeah.
that
Yeah.
sort of here.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you sort of see it, yeah, and you shared it with
Mhm.
me, and I
Yeah.
said
So
the
if
first
if
thing,
you
this
think,
is like for like a
yeah.
2 year old,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's for
So
really
if you
like
think
a
about
baby.
that comic book is kind of a prequel to this
Yeah.
film, I feel like, because if you look at that, is that comic book that they released before the film was releasing. It's mainly focused on children with maybe 2 or 3 years old, with some
Yeah.
small activities, with not much dialogues, just pictures. So that was focused on a 2 or 3 year old.
Yeah.
And even an interesting part is that the first page of the film, it asks the whoever is reading it,
Mm.
where do you think Malaikottai Vaaliban is running to? It starts with a
Oh,
question.
okay.
Okay, where do
Right.
you think Malaikottai Vaaliban is? So it's asking you, it's taking your perspective on what you see on the picture. That's the
Yeah. Right.
first activity that's given. And then you can just scan the QR code and just send it to our WhatsApp and like things like
Yeah.
that. So,
Right.
that's how the whole thing starts. Like it's asking your perspective on what do you think might happen, or
Mm.
where do you think Malaikottai Vaaliban is going. So instead of just considering it as a normal activity, I see it something that Lijo has thought of, in
Yeah.
where he's going with the whole film.
Yeah.
And then
Definitely.
and the first story in the comic book is where a stone is rolling down, and then
Hmm.
Malaikotai's Vaaliban is just saving the children from the stone. No much dialogues,
From elephants,
nothing.
I think, and like there's like different animals.
Oh yeah, yeah. Then
Yeah,
he saves
animals.
them from like an eagle, then from
Yeah.
a bull, then from an elephant, and
Yes.
then all those stories are simple, like for a 2 or 3 year old child. Uh,
Yeah, and it's not just even the story; it's the illustration style as well. It's
Illustration. There is
it's
nothing
it's
much, no
it's like
much dialogues. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's written. It's drawn by like it's specifically drawn for like kids of a very young age, which then leads
Mhm,
on to your point that you mentioned about sort of the whole evolution and sort of seeing this as sort of time progresses. Because the first scene is very simple, easy to
mhm.
digest kind of
I
action
just, yeah,
sequence, if you want to
yeah,
put it. It's a lot of
yeah, okay.
like fading away. It's just
Mm.
he's just using the scarf to do something, whereas we see the
Something, yeah.
one which is completely over the top, which is
Oh, the true, true, true,
that's
true.
when you're on a different journey in the anthology
Mhm.
sort of metaphor, if you want to put it like that. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's really
even
interesting.
if you think about it, the early stories that we used to hear is about maybe like mythical stories, like about
Yeah.
Hanuman or about Ganesh or
Yes.
things like that. If you think about the film, the introduction of Mohanlal is like where his shawl
Yeah.
like goes like a tail, and like he looks like a monkey jumping around. That's
Yep.
how Mohanlal enters into the frame, and then he falls, where his
Mhm.
face covers the gada, the stone gada, and things like
Yep.
that.
And
So
there's that
he comes
scarf.
in a very
His
comic.
sort of scarf moves across like a tail, right? They have
Ah,
that
yes,
shot,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes. And then it's like we can imagine it like like Hanuman like
Yeah.
wrapping somewhere around his tail and then just flipping him over and things like that. If we
Correct.
want, we can imagine it in a
Mm.
similar way. But then again, it has that childishness to that
Yes.
portion has childishness. Even if you think about it, when the first villain, or the first, the wrestler, he enters, he's like, he jumps down and he's like, yeah,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
he
yeah.
runs, takes his gada and do all this,
Yeah,
like, again
yeah.
and again and again, and then
It's
someone with him does something similar with a small
yeah, yeah.
string, and like it's done very comically, and then
Yeah.
it's done in a way how like a very small kid would imagine such a story.
Yeah, like kind of cartoonish, like not in a
Yeah,
offensive
cartoonish.
way,
Yeah,
but like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of like, it feels like a cartoon, like how they would do it, with, especially with the kid doing that. It's like something like you would find in like Cartoon Network or something like that, or like Looney
Mhm.
Tunes, or like
Oh,
that kind of comedy. So
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
definitely something there with
Mhm.
the
And if
age
you
one,
think
because
about it, the
yeah,
only movement that happens is with Mohanlal's character and the other wrestler.
yeah,
Rest of the audience are just standing there,
observing.
simply staring at the whole thing.
Hmm.
Some people are just doing something,
Yeah,
just looking at it. Even when he was flipped over, I think they didn't have much of an expression. They
yeah,
were not amazed at it. They were not like more. Even though the leader of the group said, okay, we are going to take him away, or just
yeah,
shave his head and like
yeah.
make him
Send them
ride
down
a
the road.
donkey and things like
Yeah,
that. But then the audience are all just still. Again, all because when a child, a very small child, imagines a story like this, it is always the hero, and then who he's
Mm.
against will have the major moments. Whatever is in the background might not be that much, and the
Yeah,
story shows that as well.
definitely.
If you see skits done by children, it has
Yeah,
a
yeah.
similar, like an appeal, like a setting on how that
Mm.
happens. And
Yeah,
then
exactly right.
yeah, and then if we in this like in this anthology, if you think about the second like the portion of the second story, it is a slight more bigger concept than what is before,
Mm.
where it goes to an institute that
Yeah,
teaches like wrestling, but then their teaching is based on cheating, and then they have cheated on people, and then because of that they have won so many battles, and there is a person who is affected by that, and then
yeah,
he is paralyzed and on the side. So the concept is a little more bigger, how
yeah,
maybe a 10 or 11, a 10-year-old would perceive the
yeah.
story.
The
If
concepts
we
are being, I guess, furthered. They're more advanced than
advanced, yeah.
before. And I
So
think they also introduced like the stage show. They introduced a female character, so they
in
started
between,
like new themes, which are a bit more, I guess, you would get
yeah,
as you
yeah,
start
yeah.
to grow older,
Older,
rather
yeah,
than the
yeah,
very early scenes, which
yeah.
was
Early
need to
sequences, yeah,
work
yeah,
with
yeah.
that.
Even if you think about the first romantic sequence,
Yeah,
after right after this incident,
yeah,
it's like a female and a male standing like far away, looking at each other, and doing very quirky expressions, just looking like this. If you remember
mm.
Mowgli film,
Yep,
the
Jungle
animation,
Book.
how Mowgli meets the girl in the village,
Hmm.
that kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
a thing, where they're standing far away, and finally they meet, and they just lie on the bed and tell
yeah,
stories. That's how a very small kid would imagine love,
yeah.
with whatever he has seen around and
Hmm.
whatever he has gained information. And even that
Yeah,
story that they or a fable that they are telling us, it has a metaphor on what
mm,
Vaaliban is, but we
correct.
don't get it unless we see it in that way.
Yeah,
So the whole romance and everything is seen how a very small kid, like maybe 6 or 7 or maybe 5, would imagine such a story when someone is telling them the story.
correct.
So that's what I personally felt. And when
Yeah,
we move to the second part, it is a little more, how a little more older kid, maybe a 10-year-old, would
hmm,
see the film. and
correct.
that's where and that's when we get influenced by a lot of Chinese, Japanese,
Yeah,
and maybe
the
we get
action
introduced
sequences.
to, yeah, we get introduced to like Pogo or Cartoon Network, and
Hmm.
all those animation channels,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
we watch Jackie Chan, then we
Hmm.
watch or Ninja Hattori, for that sake,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
a Pokemon, and it has that kind of an anime vibe to the second part of the film. That's
yeah.
what I personally felt. And even if
Definitely.
you
Yeah,
think about the action is choreographed in a way where very Chinese, or Mohanlal
yeah,
going upside down with this position,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
getting on the stick, and on the whole fight choreographed.
Yeah.
it's it all has that Chinese or Japanese influence,
Yep.
which I, if I think about it, I personally had a fascination. That's where I started learning kung fu when I was like
Yeah.
10
Right.
years old.
Interesting. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that kind of vision, like,
Yeah.
so
No. No.
that's
That's a
how
great
a
point.
10-year-old would imagine such a story when it's
Yeah.
told to him. The fight sequences that a 10-year-old would imagine is something a bit more, martial arts oriented, and
Yeah. It's all
that
sort of
gets,
hand to hand sort of
yeah,
combat. There's
yeah,
not. I don't
yeah,
think if there's weapons, it's just sort of very
yeah,
traditional
yeah.
weapons.
Even
Nothing
weapons, they
like
use weapons
what
like
we see.
slowly. Yeah.
Nothing what we see later on. But even like, because I
Hmm.
think like that Chinese, like that specific like kind of martial arts, because they had this
Hmm.
whole thing like Chinese martial arts was very much they included like fantastical elements to them. So if you see
Hmm.
like movies
Yeah.
like the most popular one like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like they're actually like
Hmm.
flying around, jumping up and down with swords
Hmm.
and doing battles, which is not grounded. Like Bruce Lee
Hmm.
movies are more grounded. Like his ones are
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
fighting, but Chinese ones are more flying up and down. So those
Flying
are,
up.
I
Yeah.
think that's where the influence really came from
Came
there.
from
So
two.
exactly right, and that's when like I don't know, I watched them in my early like teens. I'd put that's when
Hmm.
my fascination really kicked
Hmm.
in about that. So
Hmm.
maybe it's meant to appeal for people of that sort of
Yeah.
generation and the time period.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
definitely I think the metaphor about sort of how it's progressing and becoming a
Hmm.
bit more because I guess a really young kid who's like maybe 4 or 5 won't appreciate like what's happening there. They might see it more as like a circus act rather than actually
Yeah. True.
appreciate what the actual artist is doing here, like with the
Hmm.
action and all that. So yeah, it just continues on. It's not just the like metaphors in terms of the like story they're telling, but also in terms of how he's devised the cinematography and the action
Hmm.
sequences. I think if you look at
Sequences.
it, even probably the delivery and dialogue,
True. True.
probably
True.
even the score, like he probably
Mm-hmm.
all facets of it. Because I think the way if you watch it like this, where you break it down into anthologies or like
Mm-hmm.
little pieces here and there,
Mm-hmm.
then you can really appreciate the differences between each time period and see how
Mm-hmm.
he's sort of devised a different kind of feel to each one
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
target audience is different each time. It
True.
feels
True.
like so it's fascinating like that.
I
But
think
yeah,
more about the target audience rather than the target audience. I think the way of the technique that is used to tell the story is through
yeah,
the perspective of the kid rather than
yeah, 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 yeah,
like showing it as a target audience. Like it's
Mhm.
how a child would imagine the story.
Yeah,
I
true.
felt it in that way,
Yeah.
like how a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old would imagine
Mm.
the first story. That's how I personally feel
Correct. Yeah,
a very small child would
yeah.
imagine a story with a
That's
similar
more appropriate.
context when it's told. The second one again, how like a
Uh,
10 or 11-year-old
10 to
would
10 to
imagine.
15. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and the concept gets bigger as well, but it's
Yes.
not, we don't say the same kind of stories to a 10-year-old
No.
and
Yeah.
a 5-year-old. The concept wise it becomes a bit little more bigger, and then
Correct. Correct.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
again the romance associated with that.
Yep.
And when we are 10 and 11 and 12, all those periods,
Hmm.
again it's just looking at each other. Even if you think about the
Yeah. Of
second
course.
song and things like that,
Yeah.
he
Yeah. That's exactly
just
right.
looks at each other very seductively, but then
Hmm.
they does nothing other than just look at each other and
Yeah.
sit beside each other.
Yeah.
And then it goes like that. And
Hmm.
even the song before the second fight scene,
Yep.
which was like Malaikottai
Mm.
Mailadum Kamugan, that song that has a folk dance and things like
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
think, yeah, yeah. So even that one is staged in a very a dramatic way, because
Mm.
while I was saying that, it made me remember about a video that me and my sister did
Yeah.
very long back.
Yeah.
It was about a story of a woodcutter with an axe
Mm.
going into the river, and a fairy comes and brings it back. So we just had a camera like that. We just kept the camera still,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we just enacted it. And that whole thing is how, like a child would imagine, like that is the kind of setting that has been put. And even
Mm.
when Mohanlal comes in and takes Danish Sait's character and just throws him, and he just goes
Yeah.
flying
Yeah.
and things like that. So it's exactly, personally felt that's how I used to imagine when I
Mm.
was like at that age,
Yeah. Yeah.
a story. And then
Correct.
this thing keeps progressing,
Yeah,
and then the second fight scene happens, and then the
yeah,
romance between um, I forgot the Chinnapaiyan and Jamanti
yeah.
happens, and then the way they look at each other in that song, and even the song reminded of one of the old a song called Kanana Chaye Ladu Mekyan. It had a similar
Mm.
tuning to that,
Right.
and
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Is
So
this the
again,
the Punara that?
yeah, Ponnara Katle Poovanathin.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that song had a very resemblance with this one, Kanane Chaye Ladu Mekyan.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
those were the songs where me personally, I when I at that point of time, I used to hear songs like that because
Yeah.
it was very much famous, and we used to sing that songs in school
Right.
and things like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That had okay. I'm again talking about my personal
Yeah, of course.
experience that
No, but
I
that's
can't
what sort of
generalize. Yeah,
but
yeah,
that
I
sort of
can't
makes this
generalize
movie
it for
special.
everyone. Yeah, yeah,
That's what sort of
yeah,
makes it special because, like, that's why I sort of the other reason why I wanted to have you on is like because there's obviously like whatever movies we watch, there's obviously a cultural
yeah. Mhm,
disconnect from myself and the movies. I can
mhm,
appreciate them
mhm,
cinematically, and there are stuff that does come to me as well. But there's
mhm,
stuff that really hits the nostalgia point for you, and I guess
mhm,
a lot of the listeners of this would also have
mhm,
the same feeling, like because I they
mhm,
would have heard that song, which I've never even heard of in
mhm.
my life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And sort of even the tune, the melody,
yeah.
the kind of song,
Mhm,
it remind you and take you back
mhm,
to a time and place, which is what I think
mhm,
this movie is actually doing with sort of what you're saying.
mhm,
It sort of takes you back to sort of
mhm,
different areas of your life
mhm.
as it sort of progresses,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
the amazing part, which is the sort
yeah.
of thing which I think is goes over a lot of people's heads. I think.
Mhm.
I want to ask you that there was one thing because it didn't in my cinema, it didn't translate it for me, but they had like chapters in
Yeah,
between.
yeah. They had chapters like it
Yeah.
was based on each place, the name of the place, and
Ah, okay.
battle in this place,
Got it. Got it.
or
Got
the fight in this place, or the event in
it.
this
Right.
place. So
Okay.
I think even in my when I watched it the second time, I noticed that the subtitles were not
Hmm.
100%. Like it
Yeah.
was not like, and some of the words were like really high
Oh,
vocabulary
really?
and like too
Oh,
much
really?
too much poetic
Okay.
for a normal audience to understand
Well,
if they're
that's actually
reading it.
fascinating because even in my sort of spoiler-free review, I talked about
Mhm,
how this had a real like theatrical feel to it. Like it felt
mhm,
more like a like Shakespearean play
mhm,
or something like that. And that's interesting because
mhm.
Shakespeare used to use language which now we consider Old English.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they're not
yeah,
in we don't
yeah.
sort of our when we converse anymore. It's
Mhm,
just for sort of that time and place. So that
mhm,
just confirms what I had sort of
mhm,
felt about Lijo's
mhm,
approach to this in his sort of, I guess, writing, because that's what's
mhm.
a little bit different in this one. But yeah,
True, true.
okay, yeah. But if we sort of continue on to that sort of battle
Mhm.
scene, and sort of
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah,
that is just like, I mean, one, it's a
yeah,
visual, just like it's if you compare that to some of the earlier scenes and how
yeah.
Lijo was deciding to show action, then this was like
Mm.
so
Completely
over the top. Like this
over
is
the
like
top.
something you
Yeah,
see out of like a
yeah.
Fast and Furious movie or like the
Yeah,
Expendables or like a
yeah,
Marvel
yeah,
movie. Like
mhm.
it's something crazy, but also like the themes he introduces at that point,
Yes,
much
it's
more
like
because
a little more bigger theme than what we had before.
it's
Like
talking
from a
about
normal thing
slavery.
of like
Yeah,
talking about cheating and
correct.
talking about deceiving people and
Yeah,
winning, and it gets to a little more broader topic, or how we tell stories to kids, like a little more
correct.
older kids, like about slavery.
History.
It talks of
Yeah,
history and slavery, and people oppressing each other,
and it
and
also
the whole act, and
it
that is the
introduces like
time
foreigners, it introduces different
corners. True, true,
languages,
true.
it introduces
And
things
more
like these.
characters comes into
Yeah,
play. They all unite together, and
yeah,
rather than, if you think about it, the first story where only the hero and whoever is standing against him has the major like movement.
yes, yes,
When
yes.
we think about the slavery, but a lot of characters are involved, all of them have parts to do. Everyone, if the audience get shaked and shivered in between,
Yeah,
they move back, like everybody is responsive to whatever is happening in the story. And
correct.
again, the music is the used in the film, everything has that, that's when the teenage time hits, and then the hormones play, and
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
crazy time for
and that
any
song.
any person, like, yeah. And that, even the song, if you think about the dance that they do,
Yeah,
the Shabnami song, the way the foreigners act, the way the whole song is put in,
yeah,
where we get curious about like item dances and
Exactly.
things like that, or anything of that sort. But then personally, I felt happy that instead of just portraying an item song or an item dance, Lijo chose to portray a talent like a belly dance, an
Yeah,
art
correct.
form
Something
rather than
specific.
just sexualizing women
Yeah,
in a
yeah, yeah.
way. But then
Exactly right.
he actually chose an art to portray the whole thing. So that was
Yeah,
something,
that's
I
that's
appreciate. Again, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I think
And
it's also the first time we see like bloodshed because like we didn't
yeah,
see
yeah, that's
like
the first time we see
just
bloodshed in
because
the
like
film.
and that was startling, right? Because like we hadn't
Yes,
seen
yes.
like the movie. I think from that point it feels like such a huge like dramatic shift in like
Shift,
tone
yes, yes.
from the I guess the previous if you wanted to break it up into sort of the fight scenes
Mm-hmm.
like the previous sort of one where in the with the cheating institute and all that the previous
Mm-hmm.
one like the tone shifts so drastically but that's also in line with sort of how we sort of grow up as well, right? Like
Grow up,
if
yeah.
you
How we
compare
grow up
to
and imagine a bigger stories, like,
yeah when we watch a
get
movie when
influenced
we're
by
15
movies like
16
Sholay.
yeah,
Yeah.
like when we see movies when we're 15 and 16 around that age, we can't appreciate them for sort of
Mm-hmm.
what they're like. When we watch them when they're
Mm-hmm.
20s and 30s and stuff like that, then we're like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay, now I can actually understand like what this movie is about. Like I remember
Mm-hmm.
watching like a movie like The Matrix, like when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to love
Mm-hmm.
it because the action, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like Keanu Reeves
Mm-hmm.
doing so much crazy stuff. I love that. When I grew up and I
Mm-hmm.
watched it again, I'm like, "Hold on a
Mm-hmm.
second, this movie is actually so much
Has
deeper and
more
means
meaning to it
so
than
much."
just action. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so
Yeah.
it kind of say it plays on that philosophy, I think, with just like
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I think the movie it can be appreciated by everyone of all ages to an
True,
extent.
true.
Like obviously I think a really young child might not be able to understand some of
Mm-hmm.
the stuff at the end. But it
Mm-hmm.
is something you can enjoy from different parts because it's
Different
and
parts, yeah.
that's sort of why I think he put so much beauty, like so much cinematography into his work and
Mm-hmm.
so much beautiful landscapes. Because he's like, look,
Mm-hmm.
this has to be engaging for everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
even if a kid can't
Definitely.
understand, or if an older person can't understand the earlier
Mm-hmm.
scenes, they have to be able to connect to this somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
that's he's doing that through his, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
amazing, like unique like gift of just
Mm-hmm.
making films come to life like he does.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just clever in that way too. It's so
Mm-hmm.
this hits on so many levels. I feel like
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yeah. So even if you think about the fight, when I was seeing the fight sequences or the great escape sequence, or how Malaikottai Vaaliban, just
Yeah,
again
yeah.
spoiler, it's
Of
a
course, right.
spoiler.
This is a
Yeah,
spoiler review.
yeah, yeah. So how he pulls down the whole pillar
Jeez.
and then save the people and save the all the slaves there. All of these things. It reminded me of how I used to imagine when I was maybe like 14, 15,
Mm,
where we are so much like we are so much, we have that hormone kick in, and then we have a
yeah.
little bit of crazy time where
Uh-huh.
we think about stories with bloodshed. We think about stories that that's so violent and sometimes and also high concept at that time. And
Yep.
then the way they ran escaped from that place between the it's like they all go in a line, one person after another person after another person after like they go in a straight line. And
Yeah.
I imagine we used to play games with my
Mm.
cousins and my friends, where the leader
Yeah.
would stand in front. Oh, you all come, go behind me, and I
Yeah.
will go
Yeah.
and lead you,
Follow the leader.
that kind of. And even the shooting sequences,
Mm.
if you think about the sound of the gunshots, it's not the
Uh,
regular kind of gunshots that we use in today's cinema. It's like
uh,
like a dishum kind of.
yep. Yep.
It's
Yep.
not like that is the sounding of that gunshots and thing. And the
Correct.
way they fall down is all like really dramatic, and how
Correct.
a teenager would imagine
Yeah.
uh, during his like that time. So,
Yeah.
and
Correct.
the whole gunshot, like when I see them shooting at each other in on top of the fort and from down, I imagine myself doing the same thing on a sofa or something
Correct.
like that, hiding behind a chair and things. It is
Mm,
constructed in a way, how uh, a teenager would
yeah.
do things like that.
That's very
Yeah,
true.
and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
whole thing
Yeah.
is constructed in that way. uh, and then it slightly moves into a little more serious tone, if we think about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
It
then
becomes
and
much more serious.
after the interval, uh, at a certain point, after this big incident,
Yeah.
it moves into a little more Shakespearean drama kind
It
of.
definitely does. Yeah. Yeah.
The type of dialogue changes, the type of music
Yeah.
changes. the
Yeah.
type of cinematography changes a little bit,
Yeah.
and then that's the time when we become a little more adolescent. We started getting introduced to, Shakespearean novels, or
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
Julius Caesar, or something like Shylock. No, what was it called? Was it
Romeo and
Shylock?
Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet, things like that,
Yeah.
which has a lot of dramatic element, or Macbeth for that sake,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
and then we started seeing things differently than before, and then all those emotional dramas, the how people deceive each other, and the way we see villains as well change. So
Yes.
if you think about everything before that, anyone that look villainish, anyone that laughs like a villain or looks like a villain, is the villain of the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from
That's very
that
true.
point onwards, we
I mean,
started
they had
observing
like
people
the
that
Portuguese guy
it's
had
not
like a eye patch. I mean,
has an eye patch, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah. Like I mean,
that's how we would imagine
literally.
a villain,
Yeah.
like when we are kids.
Yeah.
And then it comes to a phase where where we starts realizing that it's not the appearance of the villain that
Yes.
decides who a villain is. It is it's there are a lot of other aspects to it.
Yeah.
Someone who is smiling, someone who is always motivating, someone who is
Correct.
always by our side can be a secret villain as well. So
Yeah.
it
The
goes to that kind of.
Yeah, no, he introduces the concept of basically betrayal from people that are
Mhm,
very close to you, which is,
mhm,
again, just advancing that sort of, I
mhm,
guess, narrative device. It's not so
mhm,
literal anymore, like it's
mhm,
not so much like not everything is as granted. Like what you see is
mhm,
not what you believe, kind of thing. Like there's things
mhm,
below the surface, and he starts
mhm,
exploring that much more in that sort of.
mhm,
Yeah, because I was like you in that I had a similar experience. Like after that sort of big fight scene, I was
mhm.
kind of like I was getting a bit frustrated because I was like, I feel like this movie is like over. Like,
Oh,
what
oh,
is
yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah.
What is the second half now? Like, what are we doing?
Mhm,
Like, where is this going to go to? But then it sort of
mhm,
kicked into me to be like, okay, wow, I see he's trying to do something pretty different here by not having a very comfortable first, second,
mhm,
third act climax at the end. There's
mhm,
something he's also trying to tell us with the story. So
mhm,
yeah, that was fantastic. But yeah, I'll sort of let you
yeah.
continue with sort of that whole evolution.
True, true, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, and if you think about it, then the movie shifts into that drama, and then even the next sequence itself begins with Mohanlal saying that there are some war battles that can't be fought with
Yeah,
strength, and that is the
yeah,
realization that we get when we get older, and
mhm,
that's how we perceive a story uh, when we grew up a little more and
yeah.
have experiences, read classic novels and things like that.
Yes,
you know
yes, correct.
yeah. And then as the movie progresses, it moves into, even the song Raka reminded me,
Mm.
that's the time we used to
Uh,
sing songs by just banging on the
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
desk, and like we would just the whole classroom would just
Erupt.
sing song, or like we bang on the on the table desk, and maybe on our bodies. And
Hmm.
that song reminded me of that. And then if you think the song, I think that rather than the drums that they played, everything else is body percussion
Yes, yes,
used in that song.
yes.
So it all makes sense, like the
Mhm.
progression of how a very small kid would imagine a fairy tale or a
Yeah.
fable, to how an adult, like a late adolescent or an early adolescent would
Yep.
imagine a story. That the progression was really
Yeah.
interesting. And then by
Coming
the
down
end of
to
the film, the last 30 minutes, it
yeah.
moves into a little more modern cinematic way.
Yeah.
The last 2 minutes, especially if you think about it,
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah, that
shots
is
made in that
pretty
film, the
different.
BGMs used in that film, the
Yeah.
editing pattern of that last 2 to 3 minutes
Yes. He
is
had
like completely different from the entire film.
he
It's
had I don't even remember. There's this one that stuck out to me which was really crazy. It's like I
Mhm.
think it's a dream sequence that the f- the
Ah,
father
yes,
character
again,
is
that's a
having
horror element,
in
that
that
has a
the
horror
horror element
element.
with the whole blue
Yeah,
and he
yeah,
just
yeah,
sees
yeah,
that and I'm
yeah.
like, I mean, one, it was just oh my god, like so beautiful, but it was
Mhm.
completely different to what he was doing before. Like
Before, true, true,
it
true,
was
true.
like he was like, I'm gonna shoot scenes this way for the first
Mhm.
sort of 20 minutes, and this way
Mhm.
for the next bit, then this way, and then
Mhm.
the last part was the most drastically different. I felt like he
True,
went
true,
completely
true.
different, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to take a whole different approach." It felt like it was stuff
Mhm.
that I'd not seen Lijo really do before. I feel like I'd not seen
Mhm. True,
much of
true.
that
No, no,
stuff, so
I
it
don't
was
think
fresh
he's
to
done
me.
something like that before. Like
No,
if you think about all his films, there is nothing as he has done before. If you
yeah, that's true.
no two films are the same. It's
It's also
always
true.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah. We
very
can't
true.
compare his films because everything has its own genre. Everything is
Yeah,
completely different
yeah,
storytelling method, and everything is different. We
correct.
can't compare two films of Lijo's because they
No,
will
no,
be
no,
different, and that's what Lijo always offers to his audience. Like the next film won't be the same as the
no,
previous
no.
film, so it's like you'll get something completely new.
Definitely. And I think we mentioned like even towards the end, like the end credit
Hmm.
scene, like a rap.
Hmm.
Like
Rap,
this like
yeah.
whole,
Then suddenly the music completely
no, no,
changes into a rap music with
yeah.
English lyrics. For
Yeah.
surprisingly, I was surprised with the English
Yeah.
lyrics by the end of the film, which was sung
Yeah.
by Mohanlal again. Like I was
Yes.
like, oh my, what a shift of music!
Yeah, yeah.
What I am imagining is that if it has a second part, it
Mm.
might be a little more fast paced, modern. It might
Oh,
include more
definitely.
modern cinematic elements
I think
and
so.
a little more fast paced editing. And then by
Yeah.
the end of the film, it would like
Slow
slowly,
down.
go to a Zen mode, and then
Hmm.
will end in a very peaceful, calm way.
Correct.
So there is a possibility based on the progression that's been happening till now.
Yeah.
I think that's how the movie would go about in the
So,
second film. Again, it's Lijo's film. We can
yeah.
expect only the unexpected. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
so
very
we
true.
don't know what happens, but then that is with this progression. I think that's how the film will go if it has the
I
second
think
part.
because when I saw that sort of, I was actually surprised when the movie ended like that, because
Mhm.
I was like, that's the end. You're going to end it on like that big sort of conflict between the the
Mhm.
father and the son, and
Father
the
and son, yeah,
the
yeah.
foster father, the guy who he grew up
Mhm.
with.
Mhm.
And all those sort of storylines come to play, and like I thought
Mhm.
they were going to bring back like the lady
Mhm.
he was actually in love with, and he would actually accept the fact that he has to be with her
Mhm.
to become a better person, and all that stuff. So I feel like the movie was almost written like it must have been written completely from end to end, and he just said stop
Mhm.
here or something like
Yeah.
that. Because it to me it just felt like it was incomplete. Like maybe
It is,
they
it is. And it
yeah
has a lot of abstract elements to the film that we
correct
really need to read through the frames. And
yeah
that's
yeah
why the frames are long. It's not like each shot
yes
takes its time to establish because
mm,
it is giving us time to read between each
yeah
shot.
to
That's
digest
what
it
the film, yeah, 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 that's what the film is doing.
correct
But one thing is nowadays we are a little more, we are uh, our generation is a little more faster than what we were
yeah
before, and like we want things to be fast. We want sudden things happening. We want more events happening in a very
yeah
short span of time to give us that adrenaline
yeah
rush, and then uh, we don't enjoy slow films anymore at some point. That's what I
Yeah,
personally
they've
feel.
become no, they're like I think the slow burner kind of I guess genre I think
Mm,
has emerged as of late, because I don't think
mm,
back in the 90s and early 2000s I watched movies and
mm,
there was some they might say okay this movie was a bit slow if you compare it to
mhm,
like a traditional action movie or something like that. They
mhm,
might compare it with its own genre or something like that, but to actually have
mhm,
a movie like this which actually takes the time to draw you out and things like
mhm,
that, it's become almost like a niche kind of movie. Like
mhm,
it's a slow burner kind of movie, whether
mhm,
you put it as action or drama or thriller,
mhm,
it's all like people don't I
mhm,
don't know if people appreciate those movies as much
mhm.
anymore just because of the
Anymore.
way cinema's gone, because of
Yeah, yeah.
people have it is also probably a bit to do with people have a bit
Mhm.
short attention
Like
spans, I
it is
feel like.
appreciated because it's a classic and it's there and it was appreciated long back, and
Yeah,
it has the nostalgic element to it. People
yes,
like to go back and see that such films, but then expects all new films to be in a similar pattern, in a
yeah,
similar pacing, on a similar editing pattern. Like
yeah.
that's what we expect. Again, that's what modern cinema has like made us. And then Lijo is someone who just goes against
Oh
all
yeah,
those
he,
regular stereotypes and
yeah,
norms, if you think about it.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
So,
no, no, he's always I mean, yeah, you watch a Leisure movie and you compare it to any other movie, and you feel
mhm,
like you're watching something else. And that's
something
why he's
else.
sort of in auteur, and he's so unique in his filmmaking
Mhm.
approach, and even unique in all his individual movies. But man, thank you for sort of sharing that
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
sort of end to end sort of psychology of this movie, because
Mhm.
I think it's a fascinating sort of way to look at it. And I think if more
Mhm.
people looked at it like that, it's really good. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm thinking you brought it up already about some of the criticisms, because I was
Mhm.
keen to, it's sort of been around for a bit more, and I think we addressed one of the criticisms just then about sort of about the fact that it's a bit more slow paced and a bit different, and maybe people were
Mhm.
expecting a mass commercial thing to be
Mhm.
a bit more maybe in your face a
Mhm.
bit more, or maybe a bit like maybe a bit more appealing to modern audiences maybe.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I guess what were some of the things you think that are sort of really holding this movie back, and it's getting a lot of mixed reviews? I would say it's not a disaster movie or anything like that. There are a lot
Mhm.
of people that like this movie, including us two
And
right
after
here.
the
But
first week, I think there are more audiences coming in.
yeah,
A lot of cinephiles coming up, watching the film, enjoying it, and then there are people who still doesn't like the film. They still think it's a waste of time. They
mm,
still think it's not up to the mark. Yeah, but it's all right. Like
that's
we are
fine.
all
Yeah, yeah,
different. The way we
yeah,
perceive things is completely different from if what you have perceived from the film will be completely different
of
from what
course.
I've
Yeah, yeah,
seen, and that's how someone else would feel. The thing with this film is that you can you can see the film in the way that I watched the film. That's my
yep,
experience. You can see this as a movie that goes like a novel, like a
yep,
novel with pictures, like painting pages in a
hmm,
novel. That's what another review that I've seen, or
yeah,
like
right,
reading a comic book, or this, or you can see this the philosophical and the spiritual aspects
yes,
of the film, the all the metaphors used in the dialogues, all the
yep,
the spiritual elements that it has, the philosophical elements that it
yep.
has. Or you could
Yeah,
just
it
see
has a
this
lot of
as you could just see this film as a failed attempt to create a
yeah,
pan-Indian commercial film. It
yeah,
is up to your perspective,
definitely.
and that's
Yeah,
what
you could
Lijo does.
honestly. You
It's
can honestly just see it as a visual masterpiece if you want. Like
yeah,
you
yeah,
just
yeah.
look. I haven't seen any movie come to screen like that in cinema. I've never seen anyone use like because I was amazed by because luckily here normally with movies that I play here like for
Mhm,
Malayalam movies I put them in the
mhm,
small cinema, so like
mhm,
you don't get that full like it's nice to see it with the sounds surround sounds
mhm,
and all that good audio, but
mhm,
like they really like that the Hollywood movies all go towards like the widescreen, so
mhm,
they actually Lijo made advantage of that. Like he actually made it for cinema. It feels like,
mhm,
you know,
mhm.
and
True,
that's
true,
not what
true.
I've not seen that. Like when I watch other
Mhm,
Malayalam movies, they're not really the same. Like
mhm,
they don't have that same sort of aspect to them. So yeah, you could
mhm,
appreciate this movie for so many different ways. But look, if people have criticisms for it, that's completely fine as well. Like every movie
mhm,
has its people that like it. People might hate the movie. People might love the
mhm.
movie.
True,
But yeah,
true,
it
true.
depends on sort of because I think Lijo actually he's also well. I think a lot of cinephiles love his work. I think the
Mhm.
mass audience is a little bit harder for them to really accept his style of
True, true, true.
filmmaking. Like a
Because
movie
it's a
like
completely, like it's a completely new style of telling the
yeah,
story. It's a new technique of storytelling that we are not used to. This is the first time such a new, because I've not seen a film that uses this
no,
technique of storytelling with different perspectives of age. It reminded me of the poem done by Shakespeare,
yes, you mentioned
Stages
that
of
one.
Men.
Yeah,
Like from childhood to adulthood. It reminded me of that poem by Shakespeare. So
yeah,
this movie tells story in that way, like from a kid to boy to a
mhm,
soldier, like that kind of progression, how
correct.
the seven stages of life happens, based on the perspective, that's how the film progresses to the end. So that is a new kind of technique used to tell the film, which we are not used to, and this is probably the
No,
first time that I am seeing a film like this. And so
oh,
it
same. Yeah,
might be difficult to even if you think about Nanpagal Nerathu Mayakam,
yeah,
which is again a slow film, but then all the emotions and all the
yeah,
storytelling technique used in the film is easily is can be easily connected with people.
yeah.
We could connect with the emotions of or James or Sundaram,
Mm-hmm.
and both the characters and their wives, and then
Correct.
the
Yeah,
people around. The language that is used in the film is something that everyone could understand, even though the story or the concept was a bit confusing for some people.
mm,
But then the whole thing was able to connect with the people because it had that kind of a storytelling. But
yeah,
in the case of Malaikottai Vaaliban, it is more like the we are not connected with the characters at many
correct.
points, just like how a kid would not connect, uh, for a kid, Malaikottai Vaaliban in this early ages, Malaikottai Vaaliban will be just a strong guy,
A strong guy.
beating, defeating people, and that's the
Yeah,
only thing that the kid would know about Malaikottai Vaaliban. But then as he
correct.
grows up, he we find motivations, we find motivations for the actor. Why is he like this? Why
Yeah,
is he strong? And what is the conflict that he has? And that's what happens towards the end of the film. And
yeah.
towards the end of the film, we kind of you know empathize with the character, or we kind
Yes.
of get close to the character towards the end, or the last 30
Yep.
or 45 minutes is where we actually know, okay, who Malaikottai Vaaliban
Mm.
is, who are the people around him, what are the emotions that drive him, and what are the emotions that drive the villain. Again, that is something that I always feel, because if you think about all the villains in the film, the first
Mm.
villain is very plain and shallow, nothing to
Yeah.
connect with. We don't know his backstory, we don't know anything
No, no,
about
no.
him. The second villain, we know what are the things that he has done
Yep.
before. He has betrayed someone, and that person is paralyzed, and that person gives instructions to Malaikottai Vaaliban that, okay, he is this kind of a person, and we
Yeah,
know
yeah.
the villain a little more. And again, the next story comes in, the person looks villainy, it he has everything that a villain,
Yep.
uh, 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 all the physical aspect that a
Yes,
villain
yes.
would look like. And then there is a villain that travels throughout the film, who has
Hmm.
a very, again, another very villainy smile, a laugh, and
Yeah,
then a
yeah,
villainy
yeah.
look, who is always a bit caricaturous, who travels throughout the
Yes.
film. And then we realize that not just the appearance, there are people who are in the film, who are like, who was always with Waliban, like the character of Ayanar.
Mm.
He was actually how Ayanar was using Waliban, and then what
Yeah,
was the motivation behind villains. That is something that we think about when we get a little more older, because
correct.
before it's just the hero and villain, they fight each other, that's it. But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
at some point we start realizing, why is the villain, and why the
Yep.
hero is being the hero, and what is the
Yeah,
motivating factor of both.
the whole concept of anti-villain, right? That
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
exist
true,
when
true,
you're
true.
in the earlier scenes, right? So again, it
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
didn't get to that stage because we didn't get to fully grasp
Rasp,
the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
I think, and I think that would have been
Mhm.
explored a little bit more, definitely in a sequel or whatever they do. I
True,
feel
true,
like
true, true, true.
he'll do something with the second
Mhm.
part in some
True,
way
true, true.
whatsoever. Whether it's
Yeah.
a shorter version of it or something
Mhm.
like that. Maybe he'll do a
Mhm.
comic for Christ's sake.
True, true,
you know,
true. Who
he
knows?
might just end it
Yeah,
on
yeah,
on a
yeah.
full-fledged
And
comic
then,
book.
and again, when Lijo in his press meet, he said that this is a tribute to his childhood, and that
Yeah,
made
there
a
you
lot
go.
of sense. It
Yeah,
each story shows him at a particular age,
yeah.
like till, if you think about, till the end, and even the rap song or the pop
Yes, yes, yes.
rap song at the end. The whole treatment of the film. If you take each, if you think about love, if you think about, even if I didn't think we didn't talk about that. If you think about love,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, uh, how it happens first, them telling stories to each other, lying beside each other,
Yep.
to them looking at each other very seductively, to the
Mm.
first kiss happening
Yes.
only later towards the film, and then a little more intimate, like they're hugging each other and having a
Yeah.
kiss, and then a child is being born later on,
Correct.
towards the
Yeah,
end of the
yeah.
film.
The full
And
circle.
then the dynamics that happen, all of these things are
Yeah.
like, that shows the progression of age, the perception that we have with the progression of age. So it's
Definitely.
actually a brilliant work. It's a big vision, like no one has thought about before, and since this is
Correct.
new to us, we it is hard for us to digest. And the film is like
Correct.
2.5 hours long as well,
Yeah,
whereas
longer.
his previous film like Nanpagal Nerathu Maikkum was just 1 hour
2 hours?
45 minutes for that
Yeah,
sake.
okay, wow, even shorter.
Even though the
Yeah, yeah.
film was slow, the film was short. It's a
Correct.
very it had only 1 hour and 45 minutes,
Yep.
and the emotions that was portrayed was easily able to connect, and
Yep.
the whole presentation was also in a connectable way. Like we
Yeah,
could
yeah. I
connect.
mean,
It was
Nanpaku is
that
very grounded.
that kind
Like
of
it's
treatment was there before itself. So,
yeah,
but then
it's
this
a
one is completely different
yeah, no, no.
kind of treatment, and completely different kind of perspective in terms of the storytelling perspective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think
but then
like if
again.
there's any sort of comparisons like Nanpaku and like
Mhm,
Angamali Diaries and like
mhm,
I guess those two maybe Amen as well. Like they're the ones that are a bit more grounded type, so we can really
mhm.
relate to
True,
them.
true, true. Yeah,
This
yeah,
one
yeah.
would be kind of more on the side of maybe Truly, which is a bit
Yeah, it's
like
mainly
it's got
fantasy. It's
that
fantasy,
it's got that
like a
fantasy
fairy
element to it.
tale. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess even Truly's grounded for most of it until the end. But
Mhm.
like like I guess this movie is completely fantasy. It feels like from
Fancy.
start to finish. Like because he introduces
Yeah.
himself, he's not. They don't really define what he is, but he's definitely not of human nature because he has like
Mhm. True, true, true.
superpowers, but they don't really
Mhm.
explain that. But I guess that's
Mhm.
again something to
Mhm.
explore more with the whole giant thing.
Oh,
But
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, no, it's a
And
super
then
movie. It's
even
super
if you think
complicated.
about it, the expectations were something that affected the film, I guess, up to an extent, because
Yeah,
Lijo and Mohanlal tying up together
yeah, of
on a
course.
big budget film. When we hear something like a big budget film, we obviously think of something like maybe Bahubali or KGF.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When the production team was saying it's not like Bahubali, it's not like KGF. Even
No.
though while they were saying that, it was giving that kind of a feel. And the assistant director of the film gave a comment
Oh,
saying that
really?
the theater will shake on the introduction of
Uh,
Mohanlal. So, and then people were
right.
like, okay, if so, and the assistant director is also a director, Tinu Papachan, who did
Oh, Tina Poppins. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tinu Papachan, he did action films like, he has
Yeah,
given introduction scenes like never before. So when
yeah,
someone
yeah.
like
Okay.
that says that the theater will shake,
Yeah.
like before the release of the film, we'll expect, okay, this is something that this is going to be like,
Mm,
something so big and something,
yeah.
and some of the people like Prithviraj had commented that Lijo would, it's 100% Lijo film, and then Lijo would exploit the star and the actor that Mohanlal is. And then
Mm,
Vijay Babu, another producer who's close
yes,
to
yes.
Lijo, said that this film so Lijo always wanted to do a mass commercial film,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
this is that film and things like
Oh
that.
boy,
So people were
that's
all expecting something really
yeah.
massive, something really commercial, and this had a fan show, which was again,
Yes, right. Something
for a
different.
film that has a fan show, people will obviously think that it's something for the mass audience rather than an
Mm,
unconventional. Unlike like Nanpagal, which actually
yeah.
had
Yeah.
a festival release, and then
Yeah.
it came to the theater
That's
later on.
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
It was introduced into the right audience in the first hand, and
Correct.
then it
Yeah.
was released into the on the regular audience. So, but with this film, it was just directly released like that to the regular audience,
Yeah.
and that especially with the fan shows and all, that's what I think what the expectations didn't meet, and all the
Yeah.
first reviews were all really bad. And because this is not a
Yeah.
film that we should watch in a hurry. It's a film that you should just sit there, relax, and then
Yeah.
read through each frames, and then it's that kind of a film. But then not everyone will be able to do such kind of a
Mm.
thing. So
Oh,
it's
they
we can't
probably
blame
just
anyone. Yeah, we
yeah.
can't blame anyone
It's
for not
probably just
doing that.
no. It's
Yeah,
probably just not their taste. People
yeah,
just
yeah. It's not their
people like
taste.
movies
So
for all
it is
different reasons.
understandable. Yeah,
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 it's completely fine. Like not this,
yeah.
not you don't need to have much because that's one criticism that I think is a fair one for Lijo. Like all his movies
Mhm,
are sort of open ended sort of endings,
mhm,
and people are like, "Oh, it's
mhm,
another Lijo movie. He's not going to end it. There's not going to be no
mhm.
conclusion. We're going to
Yeah.
walk out and be confused again. I've seen this
Mm.
before. He's done it again. So I can even Nunpuckle had that sort of open ended conclusion and all
No,
that stuff. So I mean, that's people. Some people like that. Some people
mhm,
genuinely want conclusions to
mhm,
movies. But you're right. Even from like the promotion point of view, because we were covering the promotions of this movie, and I
mhm,
hadn't seen a movie do like 6 or 7. He did like so many promotions from like a glimpse to like a happy birthday glimpse to like a New
mhm.
Year
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
teaser to like an official teaser to a trailer to 3 or 4
Trailer,
songs
yeah.
coming out. Like this is uncommon for Malayalam cinema. Malayalam
True,
cinema,
true,
I've seen
true.
like maximum one teaser, and then there'll be a one
Then
trailer,
the
maybe a
trailer,
song, and then out.
yeah, that's it,
And
release.
and it's all like before like maybe a week, like like
Mhm. True,
that's
true, true.
that's how it's like. But this one was like
Mhm,
let's tease it like a year before, and it
mhm.
just
Yeah, yeah,
keeps
yeah, yeah.
coming.
And then it
So a lot of
just
things,
slowly started giving posters like in
yeah,
between.
posters
They
as
used to
well.
give regular updates in between, keeping people interested.
Yeah, I
But
remember
then
about
again,
this movie.
even that one, even if you think about the production team doing something like that with the promotions, I think it's again understandable because if you think about it, an industry that have very few films that have crossed the 50 crore Kerala box
Yeah,
office collection, uh, like for them doing an experimental film like this, a film that uses a completely new storytelling technique
yeah,
with a
yeah.
huge budget, like people say it's 50-60 crores, but then I don't think it will be that
Mm.
much, but then
Right,
something
okay.
around maybe 30 and 50, it's something between 30 and 50 based on what all we saw on the film in the
Right,
film.
okay. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
So just imagine a very small industry, entity wise, a very small industry,
Hmm.
bringing out an experimental film with such a big budget.
Huge
It is
budget.
very rare. It's very rare in Indian cinema
Yeah.
to make a big budget like experimental film. And the thing about
Correct.
the production team, they have invested in this. They believed in the director, and they did. That's something great from their part. And probably that's why they did this kind of promotion, I guess, so that the initials will be good,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then so on. But then it affected a different way in terms of acceptance of the film. But then later on, I
Yeah.
hope it will be more accepted, or
Yeah,
maybe some.
I definitely feel like once it, unfortunately, because the thing is now with sort of movies, if it comes out, it gets bad reviews, people won't sort of,
Mhm,
go to the cinema and watch it. They'll wait for
mhm,
streaming and then they can watch it at the comfort of their home in their own time.
mhm,
And I feel like this is a movie that you could probably appreciate maybe even a bit better at home because you could actually take your time to actually digest it,
mhm,
watch it,
mhm,
once, watch a scene again twice and watch it and really try to appreciate it a bit more and be like,
mhm,
sleep on it and be like, okay, wait,
mhm,
I think I understand now what he's doing. Let me watch it again in a few weeks. Let me watch it again in a
mhm,
month and be like, oh, wait,
mhm,
okay. I'm starting to understand more and more what he's
mhm.
doing.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
it gets
true,
you the
true.
first time, if you're interested
Mhm,
after the first time, you might be tempted to
mhm.
watch it again.
Which is
Like,
the
I
second.
mean, you saw
Yeah,
it twice in cinema,
yeah, yeah,
so
twice, yeah.
so for people like yourself, when it comes out on OTT,
Mhm,
like if they're
mhm.
waiting for it
We'll
and they
watch
really
it.
like it,
Obviously, I'll watch it again when it releases at
yeah, yeah,
OTT.
same. I'm waiting for it to come on OTT too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
But
hey,
then
man,
this film is something that demands theater watch to be fair because
oh,
of the
that's
grandeur of the film,
100%.
because of the frame, because of the sounding, everything.
That's
The
100%.
grandeur of the film demands a
Yeah,
theatrical watch. But then the film is something that you should, be relaxed, and where you are,
mhm.
you should read through the frames. But then again, that's not everybody's taste, and everybody doesn't have that kind of time and that kind of patience to do
Yeah,
something like that. But then, and it's understandable, and it's not
yeah, yeah.
something that's bad, or it doesn't
No,
make you a
no,
bad
yeah.
person not accepting the film
No, no, and
in
even
that way. But then,
like even if you are somebody that does enjoy sort of taking your time to watch movies, you can still miss. If
yes,
like
yeah,
even if
yeah.
you read through the lines and you still don't feel like you connect with the
Mhm,
characters, for instance,
mhm,
you're
mhm.
like you wish you had understood Malaikottai Vaaliban a little bit more,
More
or
true.
you didn't maybe appreciate sort of maybe the romances. You thought they were rushed. There's other
Mhm,
criticisms you can also have. So it's not a
mhm,
perfect movie by any means. It's really and I don't know if there's any really perfect movie like, but for
true,
Lijo,
true.
it's really like something like if there's I guess if you view it with sort of what the view that we've had, and I hope this has helped to
Mhm,
help to give a different perspective on this movie. So anyone
mhm,
watching this video, let us know your
mhm,
thoughts about it. And
mhm.
obviously, Bibin's given some really, really great insights. And thank you, mate, for coming on. Like, I really appreciate this conversation. It's just been fantastic to have your point of
Yeah.
view. And
Thank you
yeah,
so much
because
for
like
inviting me, because again, it's my first time doing something like this.
yeah, guys,
So, yeah,
show some appreciation for Bibin. He's
yeah,
come
yeah.
on his
But,
first sort of
thank
first
you so
video.
much for inviting and giving me, like
No,
an opportunity
honestly,
to.
honestly, anytime. Like I really
Yeah.
appreciated getting some of the because there's stuff that like the promotion stuff. It goes completely past me because it's not
Mhm,
there's not even one interview I
mhm.
can watch most of the time because none of them have subtitles at all.
True,
Like
true,
there's
true.
just nothing. So I don't really get fed that kind of information.
True,
For
true,
me, it's
true.
just like really okay. I heard Prithvi Raj talked about this movie. I don't know what he
Mhm,
said. you or like I'd seen their face talk about it, but I don't know what was said in that. So I'm just like, all
mhm,
right, well, this isn't for me. So I just go in without that knowledge, but getting that understanding from you and also your perspective was just
mhm.
beautiful. You expressed it
Again,
really well.
I just
So
talked my perspective, and there are a lot of other things that we can read from because we didn't talk
yeah,
about the philosophical aspect of the film with the all
yeah, yeah, yeah.
masks and him being in between. There are a lot of philosophical
Oh, there's
aspects. There
so
are a lot of
much.
spiritual aspects to the film, which we actually didn't speak in
No,
this one. But then there is that too. That's the thing with this film. You can read it in your own way. You can read it in your own perspective. That's what all Lijo films I feel
yeah,
provides. Rather than just viewing a film for its cinematic brilliance and all the
something deeper
technicalities
there.
and the commercial elements. Lijo's film always leaves room for discussion. You take
Correct.
any Lijo film, there will be huge
Yeah, yeah,
discussions on social media. There will be huge discussions on national channels, and that
yeah.
is the kind of thing that he creates. His films will be a talk because there
Correct.
is content in his film that we are able to discuss about. Yeah, there are a
Definitely.
lot of aspects that we didn't talk about in
No,
this,
there's
but
so
then
much. There's, I mean,
yeah.
even like thematically, you went to, it talked about sort of fate and destiny and sort of
Mhm,
sacrifice and all these
mhm,
concepts which are also there, like,
mhm,
growing up and like,
mhm,
especially like the death of the other people, like the two people close to him,
mhm,
grief. There was so much that it
mhm.
sort of went into, but yeah, again, it's just a Lijo movie, which even though we spent like an hour talking about it, there's still so much more you
It's
can
still
break
lots to
down. It's
unveil.
like
And then
that's the thing with a lot of sort of Malayalam movies I
yeah.
find, but especially Lijo movies. There's
Leisure's
just
films, true,
there's
true.
a
For me
lot.
personally, I would say I was able to, introspect about my entire childhood, how
Yeah.
my perspectives developed, how emotionally I started viewing things, and like I was able to introspect about myself while
Oh,
watching this film,
beautiful.
and while I was thinking about this film when I was, because even it might sound silly, but then at some point I thought, like, during the first scenes of Malaikottai Vaaliban, when I
Yeah.
watched it the first time, I was like, just go to the, come on, just go to the next scene, just go to the,
Yeah.
I was constantly saying this in my mind, but then later when I think about it, when I become a dad at some point of my life,
Mm.
and when my child takes time to process his or her,
Yeah. Yeah.
information that she's getting, will I do the same? Will I rush,
Yeah.
will I rush my
Yeah.
child, not giving him the time to process what he requires?
Definitely.
This has nothing to do with anybody else, but then this is
No, no.
something that's too personal to me, and like I
Correct.
that is the insights, and that is the thing that this film has brought into me. It
Yeah.
made me
Beautiful.
think about a lot of things. It made me think about myself. It made me think about my childhood. It made me
Correct.
think about what kind of a person I am in terms of viewing things, in terms of my patience, in terms of
Yeah.
me reading things, and you know uh, so that's what this film does, and again, it is an amazing visual treat
Oh,
to
that's
watch in
definitely
theaters, and that's undoubtedly, like everyone is saying. That's why
definitely.
I think if you have the patience, and if you have the if you have the time and patience to actually
Mm.
sit, relax, and understand the film, how it progresses, I think it's a must theater watch.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely agree. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, a raving review from the both of us guys. Go out to the cinema. Don't listen to whatever
yeah.
other people are saying.
Mhm.
This is the only place you need to listen to. But again,
Yeah.
Bibin, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much.
yeah, we'll definitely chat soon, man.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.